Denver Broncos wide receiver Courtland Sutton will not report for the team's offseason program. Could he be extended or could he be traded? We'll break it all down on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get Locked on Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So make sure, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Speaking of terms and conditions, Sayre, the Broncos have Courtland Sutton on 2 years left on his deal here in 2024, and then obviously next season. And Courtland wants a brand new contract coming off of a 10-touchdown season, and it was reported by NFL Network's Tom Pelissero early on Tuesday morning that he will not report to the team's offseason program unless he gets a new contract. There's a lot we got to break down here. Like, obviously, this is a big development for the Broncos, just a week and a half away from the NFL draft. A lot of questions surrounding. I mean, even before free agency began, you and I did some conversations here on the show talking about, is Courtland even going to be on the team by the time the NFL draft comes around? So many angles we can approach this from, but obviously the biggest news of the day here, Courtland wants a new extension.
Yeah, and Tom Pelissero of NFL Network reporting obviously his absence from voluntary OTAs, which isn't abnormal this time of year for certain players, but certainly the caveat that it is about the contract is noteworthy, and the timeliness of that is not coincidental. Like you said, the NFL draft is looming and getting closer and closer by the minute here. So I don't know, Cody, you see some of these receivers out there getting big money deals. Calvin Ridley got a lot of money from the Tennessee Titans. Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton's probably been talking to Jerry after he got that big money deal from the Cleveland Browns. And he might be thinking, shoot, I mean, I just had 10 touchdown catches last year, and it's a career year for me. You and I have both said it, like last year was probably the best year of Courtland Sutton's NFL career to this point. And so to his point, and for his case right now, he's got 2 years left on a contract, only $2 million in guaranteed money left. And he's probably thinking to himself, man, in this current market, with the way wide receivers are getting paid out there, Gabe Davis, I think, getting over $13 million a year or something like that as well from the Jaguars. Courtland is thinking to himself, I better get into this market as quickly as I can because he turns 29 this coming October. The clock is ticking, and you want to get as much money as you possibly can. Maximize your value when you can, and Courtland Sutton seems to be doing just that.
Well, and on top of that, too, you look at the salary cap. I believe it counts for $17.3 million this year against Denver's cap. I think that goes up to $17.8 million next year. There's going to be some pros and cons that we'll weigh a little bit on later on, today's episode of Locked on Broncos about whether you extend him, whether you look to trade him. We'll dive deep into that. It's also worth noting that Sutton also had, according to our good friend Mike Kliss over there at 9 News, reported that Sutton had offseason ankle surgery following the injury he sustained in the season finale against the Las Vegas Raiders. He's been working out. Things have been fine. Obviously, Denver picked up, the option there on his deal. But, yes, you're right. Like, think about it. You're going to have $2 million just guaranteed money left. Like, there was a similar situation with Garrett Bowles, right? No guaranteed money this year on his deal. He's already made all the money he can make, essentially. But for the Broncos, where they're at, I think we really got to go into the conversation here. How valuable are they with Courtland versus how valuable are they without Courtland? Like, that's, I think, something we have to talk about here. Now, in the context of when Courtland tore his ACL back in 2020 in week 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, what did we see happen after that? We really saw Tim Patrick really kind of step up and emerge, right? But Tim is coming off of back-to-back season-ending injuries in training camp. So if Denver is going to take the risk of maybe moving on from Courtland or him not being part of the team this year, you have to ask yourself, does that put Denver in a position to succeed, or are they better with him? Like, I think by and large that Denver is far better with Courtland than they are without him. And there's going to be a bunch of arguments we'll obviously dive deep into here in today's episode of the show to either support that or even kind of combat some of the narratives that we are seeing about him.
Well, to your point, Cody, I mean, Courtland was awesome this past season, and he's proven at multiple stages like he can produce with whoever is at the quarterback position. We've called him quarterback proof before when he's had 10 quarterbacks in 7 NFL seasons with the Denver Broncos. So that speaks to his point of, man, the production is there. I'm seeing my peers around the league are getting paid this offseason. And I think that there's something to that right now. And we've seen, I know he kind of came out and said something about, about whether or not he's being cryptic this offseason. I think that he's been obviously sending some messages, whether directly or indirectly. I mean, he basically seemed like he kind of said goodbye on Instagram earlier in the offseason, back in January when the season was over. That's what it felt like to me and a lot of other people reading into it. And then you had other situations come about, things that he's posted on Instagram stories and stuff like that. Just you wonder, after Russell Wilson was cut, the them posting the fingers, crossed together type thing, as though like, hey, we're in this together sort of message being sent. Ultimately, he hasn't necessarily come out and deliberately said anything directly until now through Tom Pelissero. And is Pelissero reporting from his agent side of things? Is he reporting from the Broncos side of things? We don't know, but I don't know, Cody. I feel like it all signs point to this is the time for him to get a new contract. It's the time for him to get some more guaranteed money, because once you hit that age 30, you're way less likely to get a bag from NFL teams. But if he could hit free agency right now, I think he would be getting similar deals to what we're seeing, if not better, than guys like Calvin Ridley, guys like Jerry Jeudy and Gabe Davis. I think Courtland would have a really good argument to be made about getting outpaid by any of those guys. And so it's really, for him, it's a business move, and he got to make it now. Like I said, he's 28, going on 9 this season. The clock is definitely ticking.
And look, I'm all about too. Like I'm very much in the camp of, and this might be because I'm not a fan of any NFL team, but like I just love football. But for me, I'm okay with players kind of taking things into their own hands, kind of controlling their narrative now. Because I mean, look, far too often NFL teams, the business side, they often dictate the narrative surrounding a player. And so now we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in the last few years where players are actually a little bit more in control of their future and their direction, which I'm okay with. We'll see where things are at here with Courtland, though, but not attending voluntary OTAs, not necessarily a big deal. I think the timeline to watch here is obviously the NFL draft coming up there. Is he traded before or during the NFL draft? If that doesn't happen, the next timeline for us to be watching is June 11th through June 13th when mandatory minicamp does begin here for players. So Broncos Country, let us know your thoughts on Courtland wanting a new contract extension. Do you think he should get one? Do you think he shouldn't get one? We are going to dive into maybe why Courtland does deserve a new contract. And you're going to get that here on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos. Today's episode of Locked on Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small businesses, they're wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Does Courtland Sutton deserve a new contract from the Denver Broncos now that he hasn't shown up to the first voluntary OTAs here in the 2024 offseason? We're going to break down exactly why maybe he is deserving of a new deal in Denver. But I want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available everywhere that you listen to podcasts, as well as can watch the show on YouTube. Throw us into the queue, get us into your YouTube algorithm, subscribe, like, comment, all those sorts of things. And really, Cody, I think this offseason we're ramping up here now. So listeners of the show, be tuned in every single day. The Broncos, they're always going to be interesting. Got new uniforms coming up. The NFL draft just about a week away at this point. So new players coming in, new uniforms, going to be a lot to discuss this offseason here on Locked On Broncos, including potentially the future of Courtland Sutton and whether or not that future is in Denver. Cody, I think we got to make the argument for why is he deserving of a contract extension in Denver. Of course, he was one of the first players that George Payton re-signed when he became general manager in 2021. Him and Tim Patrick both got deals there at the end of that 2021 season. It really feels like Sutton is somebody that Payton prioritized from the beginning. I even think back to, remember when the Broncos hired George Payton and he took his son through the team shop and, he's like picking out a jersey. He's like, oh, I just left Justin Jefferson. Whose jersey am I going to get now? And, George is directing him over to the Courtland Sutton jerseys, so this would be a tough pill to swallow, I think, to move on from Courtland, especially how valuable he was to the team last year. So let's talk about that value. Why do you say he's worth re-signing if you're the Denver Broncos?
Well, look, I think you look at his overall career, and look, I think he was on an upward trajectory, right? We talk about that 2019 season that he had, 2020 week 2. I mean, remember week 1 of the 2020 season in practice, he separated his AC joint and missed that first game, came back week 2. There's an interception. He goes to try to make the tackle, tears his ACL. And then from that point forward, it's been trying to just climb back, right? Like he went from that to having 2 consecutive seasons in 2021 and 2022, where he only had 2 touchdown catches in each of those years. So 4 total in the span of 2 years. And then this year he explodes for 10 on the scene. Look, I posted something on Twitter about obviously Courtland. I said that I think the Broncos should pay the man. And I think that's where you're going to get a wide variety. Like if you go to my comment section, it's wild. You're going to see people who agree with me. You're going to see people who disagree with me. And then you're going to see just like toxic dialogue all across the board in certain aspects. But the thing about Courtland, right? We talk about him being the Broncos being better with him versus being better without him. Right now, Denver doesn't have like a true alpha, a true number 1 guy if Courtland is not on this team. Now, I think there's a larger conversation to be had. You mentioned that he was the number 1 wide receiver for Denver, but 56th in the NFL in total targets. A lot of people are like pinpointing and saying that's Courtland. Like that's just an indictment on Courtland. That's not Courtland's fault that, hey, he's the number 1 receiver on the team and he's 56th in the NFL in terms of targets. That's a product of the offense. And look, while Courtland led the team in targets, that really goes to show that Denver's offense last year didn't have a sustainable identity, because ideally, if Courtland is my number 1 target, I'm going to get him 12, 13 targets per game, to be honest with you, Sayre. And there were times where he had maybe 3 targets, he had 4 targets, but he would come up big in big moments, right? What has Denver needed offensively in a while? They've needed a guy who's clutch. You can think of several moments last year where Courtland came up clutch for the Broncos in moments that they needed it. Did he have over 1,000 yards receiving? No, but I think how a lot of the commentary is these days, you have to be putting up 1,000 yards every year in order to get a contract extension. What's more valuable in the end game? Is it yards or is it touchdowns? If Courtland had, let's say, 500 yards and 14 touchdowns, this would not be a conversation. Like a lot of people would be like, hey, 14 touchdowns, that's great. But because he had 710 and that Jerry Jeudy only had, I think, 14 yards less than him in terms of receiving yards, well, he wasn't a good producer. He was the main producer for Denver's offense last year. And when you look at overall production and value to the team, Courtland had 10 touchdowns. How many did Jerry have? 2? That's like a massive landslide difference in terms of value to the offense. That's why I think Denver right now, knowing what Sean Payton values that big body target, a guy that he can use at the X and also move around a little bit. Courtland epitomizes a little bit of everything that Sean wants in that type of receiver. And we saw him take a massive stride forward. Is he going to be worth a mega deal, Sayre? I don't think at this point he's not going to get that. But yeah, he does deserve, in my opinion, to be extended 2 or 3 years to where he can at least have equal market value as to where some things are at based on production. It's all about what have you done for me lately. When you look at what Courtland has done for Denver lately, 10 touchdowns, that's valuable. And now he's in a contract year. That's where I think he should get paid. Where do you sit on this and what arguments would you make for it?
Well, I think I'm gonna go the opposite direction here, and I'm gonna say, what would re-signing Courtland say about the rest of the direction the team has taken this offseason? Look, you cut Russell Wilson, right? You cut Justin Simmons, you trade Jerry Jeudy. Then all of a sudden, you're going to give Courtland a deal worth potentially upwards of $20 million a year. I mean, we're talking about a brand new market here, Cody. You made a great point in saying the salary cap has risen; it's gone up, and therefore the price on every player has gone up. And especially when you talk about current market value, if a guy is wanting to be paid current market value, this is something that Courtland didn't get to experience the last time around. The
Yeah.
Broncos got him on a very, very good deal when they re-signed him during the 2021 season, not letting him get to market in the 2022 offseason. So based on them doing that, you can't help but wonder, I mean, where do they stand in terms of like, hey, this guy is a fixture for our team. If he's a fixture for your team, go ahead and give him an extension, right? Give him the guaranteed money, add a couple years to the end of the deal. It would help your cap space right now. You would have Courtland Sutton available for a long-term quarterback, things like that. But like we mentioned, I mean, he is 28 going on 29. This is a deep wide receiver draft. There's a lot of guys that have been connected to the Broncos via mock draft scenarios, which we know could mean absolutely nothing. But there's certainly maybe some smoke to that situation right there. There might be a little fire going on there. And we've heard Sutton's name come up in trade rumors for the last couple of years, right? And teams that have been interested in him. If the Broncos, does Courtland even really want to be there? Does it come down to a conversation of, hey, I don't know who the heck the quarterback is going to be, especially if it's going to be Jarrett Stidham. Maybe he deserves to say, I want to be traded to a team that has a more stable quarterback situation where I can maximize my value, or to a team that says, hey, we want to pay this guy. And I don't know what team that would be, but that really is the thing to me, Cody, is what message does that send about the rest of the offseason? You're cutting Russ, you cut Simmons, you trade Jerry Jeudy, you bring in all these guys, Sean Payton putting his stamp on the roster. Is Courtland part of that going forward, especially with the way that he's been talking on social media at the very least? I mean, that's kind of where I come down on it, is saying, does it go the opposite direction of what message you've been sending the rest of the offseason?
I think that's a fair point when you do look at it, right? But also to the point we already know, going into next year, Denver is expected to have around or near close to $100 million in cap space. Well, now it's like, okay, if you extend Courtland now, like that could open up even further going into next year, right? And you have a lower salary cap hit in 2025, maybe a lower salary cap hit in 2026. Like there's a lot of different options there as well. But I will say this too, like last year, quarterbacks, according to Pro Football Reference, quarterbacks had a 120.2 passer rating when looking Courtland's way. And I don't think there was anybody else on Denver's offensive roster when targeted that had any kind of resemblance of production or value to how the offense was going to move about. Like there were times we saw Courtland come up with a big catch. Like I remember when he mossed L'Jarius Sneed, who just got a big deal in Tennessee. Like for me, I just think that Denver's going to have to really ask themselves the question, do we have a plan if we move on from Courtland? Can Tim Patrick stay healthy after having season-ending injuries back-to-back years? Can Marvin Mims have a more prominent role? And are you comfortable with, Josh Reynolds, who I think can produce? But behind those three guys that I just mentioned there, what does Denver have in terms of receiver product that could help them elevate this upcoming season, especially with the questions that we also have for Denver at tight end? A lot of questions I feel like need to get answered, but I feel like we both made some good cases as to why Courtland could or should be extended. But now we have to look at the other side of it as well. Could Courtland Sutton be traded before the NFL draft or during the NFL draft? We'll make the case for it. We'll analyze every angle on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Monopoly Go. And guys, I need you to all listen for this huge announcement. I've been tracking leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce that I'm finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game, Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on the classic Monopoly where you can play anywhere at any time. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. You can charge rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or you can go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play. Once again, download Monopoly Go for free on the App Store or Google Play Store. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode of Locked On Broncos, we'll analyze, should the Broncos trade Courtland Sutton if he doesn't plan on reporting to the team program, or if he wants a new contract and Denver doesn't want to give it to him? Is that the best move for the team right now as the NFL draft fast approaches? Real quick, I want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Every single day. We appreciate you so much, Broncos Country. If you've enjoyed watching the show on YouTube, just a reminder, you can get us an audio version wherever you get your podcast. You can take us with you on the go. If you got a road trip, you're going to the grocery store, you're going to the gym. We hear stories all the time from avid listeners in Broncos Country about how they take Locked On Broncos with them everywhere they go. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, let's talk about another option here that the Broncos have as it pertains to Courtland Sutton. I think right now, like if Courtland is not planning to attend voluntary program, which look, you don't have to, it's voluntary, but ideally there are deadlines coming up that maybe we have to keep our eye on. Next week's the NFL draft. Could something happen before the NFL draft in terms of Courtland being traded? Could something happen during the NFL draft where Courtland is attached with maybe one of those later round picks that Denver has? Denver's got a lot in the back end, or a couple of picks to maybe move up and get a second rounder or a third rounder. Like, I don't think Denver's going to fetch much overall. We'll talk about that. But having been on the trade block for the last couple of years, or at least linked to trade rumors, Denver has stood firm on we either want a first or a second. They didn't bite when it came to Jerry Jeudy or Courtland this offseason. They moved on from Jerry. Does this open up the table now really for the Broncos to say, all right, hey, Courtland, we appreciate everything you've done for us throughout your career, but we're going to move on and we're going to give you an opportunity to go elsewhere? To me, I feel like there is a real possibility. If we're talking about this or extension, I think this is a little bit more of a likely possibility that the Broncos do this instead.
I think so too. I really do. I feel like trading Courtland has kind of always felt like it's been on the table this offseason, even after you trade Jerry. I think we were all kind of wondering, okay, is Courtland Sutton the next one then? Because the Broncos appeared like we just talked about in the previous segment. I mean, they appear to be sending this message that it's kind of out with the old, in with the new a little bit. And although Courtland presents great value to the team as a leader and coming off his best year of his career, I mean, what more perfect time could you ask for than to trade the guy, right? I mean, obviously his value is probably never going to be higher. He's still 28 years old, 2 years left on his deal currently. That means that if a team gives him an extension, which means they give him some guaranteed money now, they're going to be able to get him at a lower cap hit for the next couple years, and then it'll be a little bit backloaded. So there is benefit, especially contending teams that have been going after quarterbacks this offseason that need wide receivers still. I mean, I think of a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who got Russell Wilson, right? They traded Deontay Johnson. They need another receiver. Courtland Sutton makes sense to go there. Or a team that's going to be drafting a quarterback. Cody, what about the New England Patriots? They've got one pick in each of the first, I think, pretty much every round this year. How are they going to be able to stack together all these different needs that they have? Maybe the Patriots would look at that situation and say, okay, getting Drake May or JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels with the third overall pick, we need a good veteran receiver because Juju Smith-Schuster, he ain't it. Tyquan Thornton, he ain't it. Kendrick Bourne coming off a torn ACL. Need I go on? The Patriots had the most pathetic wide receiver group in the NFL, and we cover the Broncos right now. So, look, I think that there's so many options out there for him to get traded to where teams would be able to say, like, look, yeah, we'll give you the extension. Although, Cody, to throw a little wrinkle in this, a little birdie that I know who works for Fanatics has told me that the jersey that they saw revealed on the back end of Fanatics website was a Courtland Sutton Broncos jersey in terms of the new products that are about to be rolling out from the team. So take that for what you will in terms of what the teams maybe said to Fanatics, like, hey, you can go ahead and print a run of Courtland Sutton jerseys. I don't know if that matters at all. Sean Payton may not care about that at all. And he's like, no, you know what? You print who you think, and we're going to do our thing. So I just think there's some interesting wrinkles there. But to me, there's no more perfect time to trade Sutton than now.
And when you look at it as well, I mean, we got to ask ourselves here too, Sayre, like if a trade is on the table, what is the trade value? Like, I think a lot of people have talked about first or second round or even a third, but to be honest with you, Sayre, I don't think the Broncos would fetch any more than maybe a fourth. I think a fifth rounder is probably the more realistic route here for the Broncos in the situation if it happened before the draft. Right now, if it happened during the draft, you might just see where it's like Courtland, the Broncos attach, a late round pick to that, and maybe they get, a higher round pick going into this year's draft, or obviously maybe even next year. But it's not going to be much in terms of overall value that maybe Denver is looking to get out of a guy who caught 10 touchdowns last season. So I think when you look at those situations, you can make the case. But now, kind of going back to what we talked about, like this does open up the opportunity for the Broncos to really invest in maybe the NFL draft and adding to the position room. Because I think if we look at the Broncos overall roster right now, the wide receiver room has a wide variety of different guys who can contribute, right? If you feature Courtland, let's take him out of the equation. Here's what the Broncos wide receiver room is right now. Michael Bandy, which don't even get me started. Philip Dorsett, who can be a speed element. I think will probably play a little bit of that Marvin Mims role, be the key backup guy or compete for that spot behind Marvin alongside with other guys like Jalen Virgil, for example. Lil Jordan Humphrey's on the roster. Brandon Johnson's on the roster. You got Marvin Mims. You got Tim Patrick's. You got David Sills, who Sean Payton really likes, who's still on the team. And then Jalen Virgil coming off of the injury. Like Denver's got a lot of dudes right now at that position. And usually it's the one position, that and cornerback, that feature the most guys at NFL training camps, right? Usually you have around 14, 15 guys at wide receiver. Denver's got some numbers now, but they need to add to that room. And more than likely they will when you factor in undrafted rookie free agents and potentially the NFL draft. And if Denver parts ways, then that means that there's one other body they're going to have to add to that position room. And can Tim Patrick really be that guy for them coming off of, a major injury? Like, to me, getting rid of Courtland is a gamble. Like, it's a risk that you're taking while also eyeing the future. Is Denver in a good position, especially with ownership, with Sean coming out and saying, we want to compete here in 2024. We believe in building our team this way. Like, is Denver in a position to do that with the money ball approach that they've been playing? I don't know. I just think it's a big risk.
It is a big risk, but you look at the 2024 NFL draft, and I wonder how many scenarios the Broncos are going through in terms of, okay, first of all, who's going to be sitting there at 12 overall? I mean, is there a chance that Rome Odunze from Washington is sitting there at 12? Or, I mean, he would be incredible to add to this team. So I think the draft could alter your plans. Maybe even Brock Bowers, who not a traditional wide receiver by any means, but could be a high volume target guy. Maybe his availability potentially at 12 could shift your thinking on Sutton and saying, hey, we're going to go with Bowers, who's going to play all around the formation offensively, and he's going to be our number one target in the passing game for the time being. That would be a fascinating scenario. Or I heard Daniel Jeremiah throw out a scenario, Cody, where he said Broncos should trade down to the back half of round one, take Bo Nix and in the first, and then take Keon Coleman in the second round, who he said he has a comp of Marcus Colston for in this year's draft. So I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. There's always a comp to somebody. I saw Brock Bowers was even comped to Michael Thomas by somebody. Maybe it was, I don't remember if it was DJ or somebody, but the point is that how many scenarios are the Broncos running through right now to where they say, all right, if we get this guy here, we could get this guy here. Or if we take an edge in round one, we could get this guy at wide receiver in round three. And do we really believe in Jared? There's so much, honestly, Cody, it's got me a little frazzled. The amount of options that are still available to the Broncos as we get closer to the draft and not knowing any sort of direction of where they're going has my head spinning a little bit. I'm sure the listeners will agree. But man, there's so many options at receiver specifically to be able to say in this year's draft, what if they could swing something like, remember the Demaryius Thomas trade was like a fourth and a fifth, I think, something like that. You could swing something like that for Courtland Sutton to get a fourth and a fifth, a couple extra darts in this year's draft. That could be interesting for the Broncos, although it would be disappointing to see him go. I think this year's draft presents them a unique opportunity to potentially move on and get some value back in return.
Well, Broncos Country, what do you think the team should do? Should they look at extending Courtland Sutton, or should they look to trade him away? Let us know if you're watching or listening to Locked On Broncos, wherever you get your podcast, or on YouTube. But that will wrap up today's episode of the show. All the options are coming the Broncos' ways. Like, there's so many different scenarios they could go through. You know what that means? That means there's going to be so much we're going to talk about all throughout the remainder of the offseason. Folks, just a reminder, like next week's the NFL draft. The Broncos will reveal their new jerseys. But on top of that, in just about 4 or 5 weeks after that, the Broncos schedule is going to come out. We're going to have full breakdown here on Locked On Broncos and rookie minicamp. I'll be there in attendance for it. So there's going to be so much that we're going to dive into that are going to lead you straight into training camp in July. Locked On Broncos is the place to be every single day, all year long. But with that said, Broncos Country, that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. Tomorrow's episode, for all you everydayers out there, the Broncos, they added a 10-year veteran at the defensive line in Angelo Blackson. And could he have an impact in the rotation, potentially behind Malcolm Roach on that defensive line, an area the Broncos said they needed to boost? Is that a move that'll boost it? We'll break it down and analyze that on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.